Good morning, everyone. I am Taylor Post, Swiftland's Office Manager, and I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Introduction to Usability Testing, and today's presenter, Diana Silvera. Diana Silvera is a librarian and president of Novari Library Services, where she works with libraries to develop, implement, and utilize technology effectively. Previously, she was employed by the Tampa Bay Library Consortium and the Charlotte Mecklenburg Library. Her book, Library Technology Planning for Today and Tomorrow, published by Rowman and Littlefield in 2018, is now available. Please welcome Diana Silvera and enjoy her webinar this morning.
Thanks, Taylor. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Introduction to Usability Testing. I'm so glad all of you are here today. And Taylor, I do try and put as many tongue twisters in the bio as possible, just for fun. So I am a very casual presenter. So I would like to encourage you to use this chat box today. I see a couple of you have put hi's in there. And Riva, are you still hearing the echo? So while I'm okay, great, thank you. So as we are going through today, please type your questions, your comments, your agreements or disagreements with me into that chat box, and we will make sure everything is addressed. The more we all chat together, the more we'll all take away from today. At the end of the presentation, I'll send you, I will give you a URL, and that will give you access to the slides. And so that you don't feel like you have to jot down everything that we're looking at. I'm going to show you a lot of tools and a lot of resources. And of course, my favorite word is free. So that is what we are going to focus on today. There are a lot of UX tools, but they're super expensive. We are not even going to get into those today. We're going to focus on what we can actually use. So the agenda today it's a lot of different stuff. We are going to cover the basics and give you a good overview so you can figure out where you want to kind of pursue and how you want to do usability testing at your library. We're going to talk about why it's important, some options for testing, and what you can actually do with the results. So before we get started, I want to know, is anybody currently or have previously done a UX study on their library website, on any part of their library services, even if it's an in-person thing? I'll give you a second to type. Okay, so Riva just a little bit, but lots of no's. Okay, no problem. It is just a fascinating whole world to enter. One of the things that I learned doing usability testing, and we'll talk a lot about this today, is I don't think like everybody else. I think my website is completely logical. It makes total sense, and I don't understand how you could be confused. It's so basic. But when you start to talk to other people, you start to use the usability testing, you go, oh, I see what you're saying. I didn't even think about that. We put things how it's organized in our mind on our website, and sometimes that is not intuitive to other people. So this is what usability study can help us really get into. So what is user experience? So one of the things to think about is if you have a bad experience, how many of you have gone to a website on the web, not even a library website, just a website when you were looking for information and the site, like you just looked at it and went, oh my gosh, I can't even, and you left? I'm raising my hand. You can't see me, but I'm raising my hand. I have done that many times, and it might have been the best site. And and it's a quick, like less than 20 seconds immediately, especially if ads are running. Yeah, very much so, especially video. That drives me crazy. But they're never going to come back, right? So that is so key to what this is about. It's to create that whole customer experience while they are here. So this is just, I'm not going to read these statistics to you, just some general statistics about websites that I thought were interesting as we did this. I'm going to kind of pull a couple things out. But especially right now with COVID, so many of our users are digital. We had a whole percentage of people who were never coming in the library anyway, and that percentage has just gone up. So it doesn't matter if you are New York Public Library, this giant library, or you are one library, little system with 3 staff members or 1 staff member, you have this opportunity because budget doesn't necessarily affect your UX. So you can create a site that works for your students, for your public, for your faculty, for your staff, and with very little money. It's just really looking at the usability of the UX. You're going to see the word UX a lot today. So how do we do that? First of all, look at that first statistic. 75% of people base the credibility of your institution on your website. So a lot of times, especially when we're smaller, our website's sort of an afterthought, but it's really important to kind of focus in on that and really get to the point, make it clean, make it easy to use. Number 5 to me is really important because as libraries, I see this all the time. We love a good slider. We don't want to choose. Everybody wants something on the front page, so we say, we'll put a slider up and we can put 20 different announcements on the front page that way. 1% of your users are actually going to use that. So it is completely a wasted space, especially if you're slide number 7. So just to kind of consider that when you're working there. So 10 seconds to impress. And all of us we know that intuitively. So let's really delve into our websites. And one of the things to think about for libraries, because this is a particular challenge to libraries, if I go to Nordstrom's, they know I'm looking for clothes or I'm looking for something. If I go to Home Depot, I'm looking for home repair. But as a library, how do I get users what they need when they might not know we have it? They might not know they need it, especially when we talk about resources. How many of you have, as a public library, talked to your users and they're shocked that you have streaming video? And you're like, of course we have that. Of course we have downloadable ebooks. Of course we have this. And they had no idea, so they wouldn't have even gone to the website necessarily to look for that information. Academics, you have so many databases, so many resources. And how do you make sure that people understand what those are and how to access that information? So it's kind of a unique challenge in some ways for libraries. Yep, Anne's saying it's hard when you have tons of stuff for everybody. And that's really our problem. We have so much amazing stuff, and how do we parse it out in a way that's logical, that people can discover it, people can find it in an easy way? So we're just going to kind of talk about in general before we jump into actual usability testing. So why do you want to test? Of course, testing will give you those specific actual issues that you need to focus on. It will help you figure out the whole website from your user's perspective. And that might be a student, that might be a parent, that might be a child, that might be a teenager, it might be a faculty member, it could be anybody. And so we have to figure out how to do that. It's going to help us figure out how they actually are using our site and how we can make that experience better for them. How can we save them time? How can we get their information faster to them? How can they find that actual information? So a couple basics of usability. So these are what I consider, and I spend a lot of time on library websites, the major issues with library websites that we really need to, when you're working on your website, you need to really think about. The first is library jargon. What is hoopla? I mean, honestly, that does not give you a clue as to what it is about. If you think of all of your database names, what do they mean when we're doing stuff? And we have so many other terms. That's just sort of the tip of the iceberg. And I'm saying hoopla because I watched something on hoopla last night, so it's in my head this morning. What are our search tools? Are you searching a catalog? Are you searching a web page? Are you searching a database? How do I actually find articles on your website? How do I find full text stuff? How do I find a book to download? How do I find all of this? Sometimes we don't have integrated search very well. Some libraries better than others. So what am I actually searching when I search? and silos. I start to go down something, I click the programs button, and I'm down this little rabbit hole, and it's really hard to get back out and find more general information. So I've siloed that information and kind of hid it away from everybody else. And I don't know why. Sometimes it's so hard to find phone numbers or contacts or addresses and things like that for libraries. Some are better than others, and this might not be yours, but sometimes, we have one main number for all of our locations because we have one sort of consolidated telephone reference, which makes sense staff-wise, but it might not make sense to a user. And not a library, but my bank does this. And for example, I had an issue and I needed to talk to the teller at my bank. That's all I needed to do because I didn't want to go through the 800 numbers because it was a really simple question, but it was something very specific to my location. It was like I was on their website for 20 minutes trying to find something. I ended up having to make an appointment because everything is closed because of COVID to go into the lobby to talk to the person. And when I got there, she said, just come through the drive-thru. I don't understand. And on their door, they had their phone number. And I'll save their phone number so now I have it. But it was really a challenge. And why did they put so many obstacles? And I think we do that as libraries sometimes. Mobile, tablet, desktop. Mobile is more and more, this is where our people are accessing our resources. Even students are doing full papers on their mobile devices. So how does our website work on a mobile? How many, are we testing on that? Are we developing for that? And then developing for desktop. And then page depth. Sometimes we get into the trees like there's nothing else because we like details because we're librarians. So really kind of looking through some of that stuff and figuring out how we can make concise and easy to do information. So the easiest things to do are the basic things. Color is a really big guide. You have to, there's some ADA stuff with color, but color should not be the only thing. But if I look at this website that's in this picture, my eyes immediately go to that new at the library, right? Because it's big. It has design, it has a bright color, and I know that that's where they want me to focus my energy on. But then there's all this other great stuff on this page, but that's really the main focus. Proportion can help you do that. A bigger button means more important. Bigger text means more important. And then consistency as we do this. That means the same thing every page that you go on the page. You don't use blue on one page and pink on another page or something like that. So when you start designing your website, and the next slide after this is actually the example of this, and you'll have that for yourself. But you want to create a checklist of before you go live, when you start designing, when you start looking at your redesign, what you're going to look at. You want to make sure accessibility, that's ADA compliance, is there. Your navigation is clear, that you have clear paths to information. I don't have to click on about and then click on something else and then something else to get a map of your location, that it's easy to find and it makes sense. That your brand is everywhere. Your brand is you, so you want to make sure that that's there. And quick information, things people are looking on your website for, is really easy to find. And also how to get help. Some people are just going to need help, so how do they get that? And make sure content is up to date, especially now with COVID. Our curbside, our visits, our hours, all of that is in flux, and it's really important to make sure our policies and everything are up to date per moment on our website, that we're going in there and we're changing. It's now 50 instead of 25 people. This is required. This is not required. Whatever the situation is, you want to really make sure that's up to date. There's nothing worse than when your page has out-of-date information and the person is pointing to it saying, I was reading your website and it said for me to do this. And you're going, well, that was yesterday's news. That doesn't create a good customer experience for anybody. So again, this is kind of a put together, but this, in the previous slide, this infographic is right here and you can grab it. This is a really great way to help you. And before you launch a page or you're just starting evaluation, I would go through this, and then you can flag things that you know are going to be an issue. So before you start bringing in usability, bringing in users, asking people's opinions, try and clean up what you can clean up first. That will save you a lot of time, because if people get fixated on one thing, then, if they're going to say, if everyone's going to tell you the graphic on the front is hard to read, you don't really need to do a usability study. So look at that first, clean up all of the kind of stuff you can clean up, and then we get into asking people's opinions and really delving into the information. The next thing to do is check your assumptions. We all think we know what people are doing, right? So this is, before we start, because we're going to look at the end, we're going to say, let's take a step back and see what our assumptions were and if they're right. What do I think is happening on my website? Who do I think is using my website? Who do I think, what are they doing on my website? What is the most popular thing on my site? What am I, and maybe I have data to back some of this up, maybe I don't. What are the issues? What are people annoyed with? Maybe it's just something that's my own personal pet peeve, that I don't like a menu item that's under something else, or maybe it's that the color just hurts my head because that's just not my kind of color. So really think about, what issues are your users facing? What are they doing on our site? And what do you think, who do you think they are? And we'll look at the end, you can analyze this when you're doing your UX, your usability test, to see, are your assumptions right, or do you need to take a step back and reevaluate what you think is happening? Because we all know, we work with students, we work with the public, we know that what we think is happening half the time is not at all. And we buy something and we think, or a new resource, or a new makerspace tool, and we think this is how it's going to be used, and we're shocked. It's not how it's used at all. So we have to look at our assumptions of what we're assuming is happening. So there's a lot of different usability tests. We're going to just kind of cover the main types. There's moderated, which means a staff member, or you, probably you because you're here, is going to be heavily involved. You're going to be talking to the person. You're going to be right there while the test is happening. There's unmoderated, which means you're just sending links to people and they're doing something and getting back to you, or filling out forms. And then, of course, there's remote and in-person. We can probably cross in-person off our list if you're doing any usability in the next 6 months, but remote is going to be key. So you're probably going to fluctuate between moderated and unmoderated with remote testing. And so we're going to kind of focus into the ways that we can do that. So we're going to kind of leave the in-person stuff alone for now. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we go further and jump into card sorting? And remember to type in that box anytime you have a thought. You don't have to wait for me to ask you. So card sorting, as Reva's typing, I'm just going to sort of introduce, okay, all is good. Card sorting is one of the basic ways to figure out menus. Menus are the trickiest thing to figure out, because what is logical to me is not logical to other people. And I can tell you, I've done many websites for many libraries, and almost every time this is where I get caught. I think I have the most logical menu. I'm very proud of my menu. And then I do some card sorting and analyzing, and it's like, oh yeah, that made no sense to anybody but me, and how that works. So card sorting is really a great way to do this. And there's different, of course, options to do this. There's closed, which means I'm telling you the topics. I'm going to say these are the 20 things that are going to be on my menu, or the 5 things that are going to be on my menu. Open means I'm going to give you blank. Here, you tell me what you think should be on my menu. I'm not going to give you any ideas ahead of time, right? And it could be mixed. It could be, yeah, Susan's saying the template and how the county uses is limited for redesign and customization. And that is true. Some of you are really locked into templates, but some of the stuff that you can control would be like maybe the library specific submenu, or what's on the front page of the library's website. So you're kind of locked into 3/4 of your page, but we'll try and focus on what you can control and how you can make that a little bit more usable. And I know those templates for the counties can often be hard because the library is not the same thing as the water department. We have so much more content, we have so much more to say. So we'll kind of look at what you can control within the template and focus there, is what I would say. And then there's moderated and unmoderated again. So what that means is I can do this card sorting with you, or I can ask you to do it on your own and get back to me. So the mixed is I give you maybe 10 cards with some basic things on them, databases, about, maps, children's, teens, and then I give you 5 blank cards so you can actually come up with your own pages that would supplement that. And that can be really eye-opening because it's kind of going to tell you what users want from you, right? It might not be even a service you offer that they're going to tell you about. So there's a lot of ways to do this. The old-fashioned way was to give people index cards and ask them to stack them logically for you. Simple, really low. This is a great thing to do in a staff meeting or something like that. If you had a group of people and you were brainstorming in person, you could do that. You can even do that if you were in different locations. And that's a great question. Who do you do card sorting with, staff or patrons? And I would say both. You might start with staff and then do a final test with patrons because both of them have different ideas of how things fit together. If you think about some of the services you offer, you might associate them with children's, or you might associate them with tech services, or you might be a reference thing, but your patrons might not think of them in the same way. So you might want to look at both usability testing from both perspectives. So there's a bunch of different stuff here, Miro, Xsort, Trello, but we're going to look at optimalworkshop.com because they have a closed sorting that I think is just, it's so easy, and it's a free thing on their website. So it's my go-to for card sorting. So this is what it looks like. So this is a closed one. And if you wanted to do this on your own afterwards, this link would you can actually kind of do the card sorting to try it out. I put all of my pages on this left-hand column. I'm going to grab this arrow really quick. So on this left-hand column, all of my resources, anything that I think I want on the menu would be right here. Then people can just pull them over, they name the section, and then they add in what they think goes underneath there. And so it's going to be maybe completely different for each person. You can set it up in different ways. You can set it up where these main topics are sort of set, or you can set them that they're open. You can set blank cards in here. The limit is 25, but I would say 25 is a really good number because honestly, if your menu is more than 25 items, you're getting into Amazon territory, and it's too much. You really need to kind of think that through. So really easy, free to set up. You create a link, you send it out, and you just sit back and wait for your responses. So it's unmoderated, but it's and it captures everything for you. You can change the instructions, you can change some branding, you can do a bunch of stuff. The results are going to tell you, 52% of people put Kids Corner and Teens in the same section. Research included this. People often grouped Curbside and Overdrive together. Whatever it is, people will, it will show you that, and you're not going to get 100% agreement. You will never, especially if it's like 20 items. But if you can start to see the overall trends, it can really help you figure out how to do your menu. And if people are not putting stuff in the right place, you can really think about, is the wording wrong? Maybe that doesn't make sense to people. Does everybody know what interlibrary loan means? Does everybody know what this catalog means or something like that? So, maybe they don't know what Canopy does. So really taking that step back and looking at why is that always in a weird place? Because it doesn't make any sense to people. And that can really clarify how you're going to set your menu. You're going to see that agreement chart. It's going to give you some merge topic suggestions. It's going to give you some popular strategies based upon what you did, and it will give you all the granular information that you just don't, it's like too much information if you ask too many people. I would not ask a ton of people. You don't need 100 people to fill out this survey. I can tell you under 10 is the most that you will want to do. We're going to talk about other usability studies being 3 to 5 people later on. So if you ask 2 staff members and 2 patrons or 3 patrons, that's probably all you need is 5 people. You will be amazed at how much information you can get even from one person. And when we talk about users, we have different types of users, right? We have power users. That's that person that is the first one. They know every single thing you do. They know everything about you. You have somewhat users, right? They come maybe once a month. They use stuff. You have digital only users, right? Those are a little harder to find and reach to. You have, rare people, and you have people who never use the library. And so when you're doing all of this UX, you really want to think about which of these groups that you want to target with this. This card sorting, because it's a little more complicated, I would probably talk to maybe not my power users, but regular users and different age groups to make sure you're kind of hitting, getting some feedback from different people. Because one of the things I found is if you ask, my local library, we have a lot of seniors. So if I just turned around and asked my 3 power users, which are all seniors that probably live a block apart from each other, can they come in and tell me this kind of stuff? They're all going to tell me the same thing probably, or very close to it. But if I can get one person from that area, and then I can get a teen, and then I can get somebody who, a parent or something like that, I can get a little bit mixed views, maybe someone who's more techie, someone who's less techie, things like that in there. The next thing is movement tracking, eye and mouse. And this sounds, I know you're going, oh, that sounds really creepy, but it is creepy in a good way. So using eye pattern searches, one of the things we already know, they've done lots of studies on this, is by default, we read websites like we read books, an F pattern. We start in the upper left, just like a news. If you did newspaper or a yearbook or anything like that 100 years ago, I'm aging myself. This is still this. We read left to right because we're that's how we read a book. If we were in a different country or we might do that differently. But in the U.S., we look left to right. So we start on that left corner. We see the logo. Our eyes sweep through the menu. Remember, we're doing this in like milliseconds, very quickly. Then we're sweeping, we go down the page a little, we sweep to the side again. We go down the page, we sweep to the side again. So how do I use this to my advantage? So first of all, I can change this by making colors brighter, images bigger, things stand out. This site doesn't have anything that really stands out, right? It's got a lot going on, but it's really nothing. The header stands out a little bit, but no more important than the menu. So it's very standard. I can use text size, text color, I can format links, I can use headings, I can do all of that kind of stuff to get people to not do this if I wanted to make them not do this. But just to keep this in mind when you're doing this, it's funny because you see a lot of websites where they're playing with the menu and they're putting the menu down the left-hand column, or they're putting it into a hamburger, or they're doing all sorts of things with their menu. This is what users want. I want a logo, I want to see where to go. That's the first thing they're doing. And especially our users are more traditional. We're not trying to be this cutting edge website that's going to blow their mind. We'll leave that to the tech people over in California maybe. Where libraries were kind of a little more focused on the user experience. So heroes, this is this section right in here is called a hero. Okay, there it is. Right here, this section, most of your libraries probably have something like this. This is not a slider. We talked about sliders not being effective. This is the single most important thing I want you to walk away with from your, sorry. Sorry, Deb. The single most important thing I want you to walk away from my website with, information-wise. It might be a new database. It might be our reopening date. It might be our curbside pickup. Whatever is really important. And this needs to be changed. This should not be a static thing that stays there for the next 6 months. This should maybe be once a week at a maximum changed so that it's fresh when people come here. And it should have a call to action. Yep, sliders, scrolling items in the middle of the page. Yes, that's what, when you go to a web page and that middle image has like 3 or 4 dots here and the arrows, and it will just scroll through different things. That's a slider. And research shows 1% of people will stick around for that. So if you think about, I put 4 things on my slider. Those 3 after the first one were just wasting your own time on posting them. That information was lost. And if that's the only way I can find that information, that is an issue with usability on your website. So a call to action is something you want me to do. Learn more, read about it, register today, click here to start streaming, whatever I want people to do. That's what that call to action is. And I'm trying to simplify this. Yep. Susan's saying she's looking at her site right now and she's seeing that the slider is there and all that information is being missed. And that's exactly what happens. People, we all admitted, right? We have a lot to do. We don't stick around on a website. And I can tell you there's very few sites that I stick around and look and see what's on the slider. Riva's saying they removed theirs. So a single call to action, and really think about what that is. The next thing to look at is a heat map. Oh. No, it's not. It's below the fold. So in the old days, we used to talk about websites putting all our important information, like if you go back to this library's page, all of our information above the fold. Yeah, Bebe's saying sliders on the catalog page, it's not a good idea. I feel like it elevates research anxiety. I think so. You're like, I'm already looking at your site and trying to figure out where to go. I know, like, my husband just finished his master's, so we were using a library's website that we're not familiar with because it was his college library, because he kept asking me for articles and I kept saying, haven't you gone to your library's website? They have it there for you. And we would go there and it was so much there, and there's sliders and there's all sorts of things happening, and it was a very overwhelming experience. And I'm a librarian. He was like, he just wanted to close it and leave, and I was like, no, we have to figure this out. But it can be very overwhelming. So in the old days, we would say you want to have all your important information above the fold. The problem is above the fold doesn't exist anymore. Above the fold means, when we all had 20 computers, what would show up on my computer screen when I opened up the computer? So now my computer is, I think it's 3,000 something wide. I don't ever have a full screen, but my computer is huge, but 50% of the time I'm probably accessing materials on a tablet or a phone or my computer. And so with Pages being so mobile oriented, that fold is all over the place. What displays on my mobile is different than my tablet, which is different than my desktop, and depending on how I have my browser on my desktop, it's different on everybody's computer. So you can't design for above the fold anymore. The other thing, think Twitter, think Facebook, we like to scroll, right? You are used to it. We have been trained with social media. When you open a page, you start scrolling. I'm scrolling with my hand, you can't see me, down the page. So people are used to that. I know it seems like they don't look at it. I wouldn't put I wouldn't put my call to action down low. My call to action is going to be on the top, but it's okay to let it scroll a little bit. 66% of people have spent time below the fold. 76% of people are using the scroll bar when they visit websites. So they are using it, maybe not. And again, this is an overall statistic. If you know your users are seniors, if you know they're very low techie, if you know they're primarily looking at your site on a desktop, maybe this is not necessarily true, but if they're on mobile, this is what they're doing. They're used to scrolling. Because scrolling on a website versus multiple pages saves bandwidth. If you think about every time you have to click on a link, a new page has to load, it takes a lot longer for the experience, especially on mobile. The next thing is heat map. Now there's a lot of ways to do this. You can really get into this. You can actually use virtual reality for it, which is this app, eyesdecide.com. You have your users visit your website in a VR experience, and it will track everything they do with their eyes, and it will tell you. So just like any kind of weather map, we all know weather maps here in Florida, red, that deep purple, that's where people's eyes are focused. So you can see they went from here down to the call to act. Oops, let me put my pointer back on. They started here, they went here, they came up to the search bar to find what they were looking for. That's what people did on this page. They didn't do a lot of other stuff. So it can be eye-opening, but this is a big commitment, right? You have to have users that have VR. This might be a staff activity. It's kind of involved. There is another option, Hotjar. Oops, this first one, and I don't have an image of it. I apologize for that. Hotjar is, you can have one site for free, and it will take your analytics of your page and create heat maps for you. So you can just look at your website through Hotjar and you can see exactly where people are clicking, where people are looking. When I have my website set up on Hotjar, so I can see that people look at my site, they click on About, and they click on What do you do? So apparently it's not very clear on my website what I do, that people have to kind of hunt around a little bit for that information. So I'm actually getting ready to start a redesign of my page. So that's one of my priorities, is to get that information a little more crystal clear on the front page. Any questions so far? Okay, so analytics are, you need to have Google, you probably have Google Analytics set up on your website. If you were like me, you have Google Analytics set up on your website, and what you do is you log in and you look at the top 5 numbers, you know, how many visitors did I have, what are the top 5 web pages they visited, and then you go home. That is just barely the tip of the iceberg of what Google Analytics can do. Of course, Google Analytics is free of charge. You're just giving them a lot of consumer data, which I think it's okay. People are kind of used to it, and it's not like Bob did this. It's just sort of, I can't think of the word right now, but aggregated information. So you can do a lot of advanced stuff. You can spend months looking into Google Analytics. So if you want to know how to do something that we're going to talk about today, if you email me afterwards, I can help you with that specific thing. I'm not going to be able to kind of go through each of these and how to today. So you can create events for tracking specific clicks. For example, one of my libraries had a lot of free activities up for summer reading. So we created a specific event tracker for those, so we could see which of those summer activities people were actually, there were free stuff around the state, clicking on. We could find out what was happening. We could get a report for those free activities for the state, and we could do things like that. A behavior flow, which is what this image is over here. Behavior flow will say they went to the main page, and then they went to this page, and then this is, you lost a certain percentage of people. You can see that kind of went down, and then they went here, and then they went here, and you can see you keep losing people as they go further down, and it will take you all the way down here. You can see some of the subpages, they don't really go too far, and maybe that's okay. Maybe you go, okay, they clicked on this page, they got the information they needed, and then they left. I also recommend looking at what people don't visit. Are there pages you have that have 0 almost every month? That information can just go. If the rare person, because sometimes we put information on our website because we think someone might eventually need it. That is not what a website is for. So what you can do is take that down, and if somebody actually needs that information, they can ask for it and you can send it to them. But if it's a 0 for a whole year or 0 for 6 months, it's not something that you need to have on your page that you're not going to maybe possibly won't even maintain, and the information is going to go old. What is your return rate? Google will tell you that. How many of the same people are coming back? How many are new? And that will help you do that. And who's visiting your sites? Now this is kind of like not the most, it's kind of a squishy number. It's not going to tell you Bob visited your site. It's going to say like majority of the site visitors were 40 to 55-year-old women. They were from Florida. They were from this area. You can kind of even scroll down more from that. And for some reason you have a large following in Nigeria. That's what you're going to get from that kind of information. So you can start to make educated decisions about your users that way. It's scary what Google knows about everybody. And that's part of that demographic information, but it can help you figure out who's actually using your page and what they're doing on there. Any questions about Google Analytics? So we're going to jump into actual usability testing. There are 4 things you need to think about before you actually really do a physical usability test. And when I say physical, when I do these usability tests, I actually do them online, and I meet the person online and I record them through GoToMeeting or Zoom or Google Meet or whatever platform you want, and I record the session so I can look at it afterwards if I need to. I let them know ahead of time. But the 4 things you want to think about is, what do you want to know? You want to know everything probably, right? But really crystallize the ideas of what you really need to know from that user. We've already established that that big purple button on the front of your page is useless. You probably don't need to involve that in the usability testing if you haven't taken it down already. Who will do the testing? It's really important that this is one person. Or if it's 2 people, it's 2 people, but not a huge amount of people, because the questioner, how they talk, how they do things, can change the usability test. The idea of this is to stay as neutral as possible and have the same information provided to each person who takes the test so that all of the information is the same. If I tell Bob something a little bit different, maybe I'm giving him a clue, maybe I'm giving him a little inside information, it could skew the results. So how will you test? Are you going to use, what online platform are you going to use? How are you going to do it? And how many people are you going to test? We've kind of touched on that a little bit already. So the first step that, what do you want to know, is what will your pre-questions be? So maybe you want to find out before the usability test, how often do you use the website? How often do you use the library? What are your general feelings on libraries? Maybe you want to get a couple demographic information just so you can kind of mark stuff. Again, you're not going to ask them, what exactly were you searching for last time you were on our site? That kind of gets into privacy, but kind of just some general information. And then at the end, are you going to ask them to do something on your page to see if once they do the test and you talk to them a little bit, that they'll have some more information. So you kind of want to figure that out ahead of time. 3 to 5 people. That's all you need. I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? But 3 to 5 people. 3 people is not that many people. What I found, I did a large UX study for one organization, and what I found is after the second person, I could tell you all of the issues on that page, and every person after that, it was the same problems. So I knew by the second person what I needed to fix. But we continued. We did 5 people, so I continued and did the survey for 5 people, which kind of just nailed it down a little bit more. So you really don't need that many people. You might look at doing 2 staff, 2 patrons, something like that, to kind of get some diversified opinion. You only want to have 5 to 7 questions or tasks. So what this looks like, and you're creating a script, and I'm not a scripter, but it's important because then I give you the same information. So each person, you're reading the script to them. Thank you for coming today. This is what a UX study does, and there's no wrong answers. We're evaluating the website, not your research skills. You want to make that clear that it's not them when they can't find the information, it's you. It's me, not you, right? So you want to kind of explain all of that in your script, and that why you're recording it and how you're going to improve the site and how important this is for them. And when they can't do a task, it's because of the site, not because of them at all. I would really stress that because people get frustrated really fast. So maybe I want people to download an ebook. Maybe I want them to find a full text journal article. Maybe I need them to find the library hours. So you want the question to be really specific, not, okay, go along and look at my page now. You're not going to get good information. My script might be, first, I'd like you to find out when the next children's program is. And then just sit back and watch what they do on your site. They might click on children's and then click on event and then look there. They might click on events. And so you're going to see different paths of how they got to that information. And you're going to figure out if they're heading into dead ends or if they're heading, oh, I don't have my events on that page. So you're going to kind of walk through that with them. 5 to 7 questions. So you really have to have an idea of what you want them to know. No more than 45 minutes. And that really is part of keeping those questions tight for them to do it. And what I like to do is after they do the questions, you can help them, and it's really hard. It's the hardest part of this, is to sit there as librarians, because we want to help so badly, watch somebody scrolling through your menu because they can't find events, and you're going, it's the third link, it's the third link, and you can't do anything about it. You have to just let them do it. It might be after a couple minutes you go, oh, don't worry about it, let's just move on, because they're just not going to find it. But also to ask them, because you're recording, to think out loud. What is their logic when they're doing this? Some people will be better at this. They might go, oh, where do I find the next children's event? Well, if I was going to look for events, I would probably find the event tab, and then I would go here. So they're going to have them, encourage them to talk through things, and maybe even ask them questions about it. Walk them through those 5 to 7 questions that are tightly scripted. Don't go off on, you want to, oh, don't worry, and start kind of talking to them a little bit between, after the questions, and make this clear in your intro. You'll talk to them about anything that they had questions about, and you can talk about, and you can give them additional information. And then you can talk about things with them afterwards. And you can have some really illuminating conversations with your users or your fellow staff members at that point. So that's a fairly in-depth thing. You're talking about a 3 to 5 hour commitment just to get the information, maybe another hour or 2 to put together the questions, and another hour. So you're talking about maybe a 10-hour process altogether. But it is probably one of the most in-depth ways that you are going to get real information about your website if you're looking at a redesign. The next thing you can do is a one-click test. This is very quick. What's the first thing they clicked on? That's all you want to know. If they didn't click on the right thing, they're not going to find almost 50% of the time, they're not going to get the information they wanted because they went down the wrong path at the first moment. So surveys are the next thing. Now these are a little more loosey-goosey because you're not asking them to do something for you, you're asking their opinion. So memory, biases, all that stuff starts to come up. But you can hit a lot more people in a lot faster way to do this. So a survey, you ask people about your website. Do you visit our website? What is the most common thing you do on our site? What is the most frustrating thing you do experience on our site? You ask those kind of questions. Again, keep it short, under 10 questions. You might have some ranking. I would avoid open-answered questions because those are really hard for users. They don't like open-ended questions because it requires them to think of the answers. They prefer multiple choice, drop downs, things like that. So really ranking, so really focus on that. Maybe one open-ended at the end, but it wouldn't be mandatory. So it doesn't need to be a long survey. It doesn't need to go to 1 million people. It probably only has to be in existence for less than a week. And and you can send it out by email. And this is a place though you can hit those lapsed users, people who don't visit your website, who are not using the library. You can kind of get the word out and just have your whole community or your whole student body having the opportunity to answer this. You might look at even your community leaders. If you're doing something like that, I would maybe segment my results so I can see if my community leaders and my users have different views. Faculty, students, alumni, staff, there's so many people, and you can segment each one. You can have different versions of the survey slightly for different groups, but it's going to give you hard data, but it's not going to give you the issues, the true issues. It's going to give you the perception of the issues. The next thing you can do is a focus group, and a focus group, I would not do a focus group until you did all this other stuff first. And if you still need clarification, you're really unsure of where to go, a focus group might be what you want. A focus group is when you sit a couple people. Natalia's asking, does multiple choice limit people's originality regarding their answers? It does in some ways, but it has its advantages. First of all, like when I've taken surveys and the Hilton says to me, how can we improve your experience? I'm like, I don't know. Like when I slept, it was fine. But if they gave me wood coffee makers in the room with this, it might open my eyes to, oh, that's an option, and give me some things. You can do other as one of the multiple choice options and let people put in something free, but most people do not like free answers. You find that that's one of the reasons people abandon surveys, is there's too much, it's too hard for them to think of original answers. And it's also on your side, it's harder because you have to organize, categorize, and figure out how all of those open answers can be correlated together. So a focus group needs to be very focused. This is a small group of people, a couple questions, where you're really trying to figure out, maybe you had really your card sorting and your UX study, and your surveys showed really different results in one area. Like maybe my hardest struggle in the world is how to figure out how to organize the database page so it makes sense for users. So maybe you're still not really feeling like you have a good hold on a solution. So pulling in a couple people, 5 to 7 people, with a facilitator to talk about that specific issue would be an idea. Again, if you're finding that everything else is fairly clear forward, you might not need to know that. So as you're designing, one of the things you can do with all of this information you collected is create a persona. A persona is where you create, I'm going to show you an example, in imaginary people that you can look at as shorthand for development, for planning purposes. So when I'm working on my page, I can say, okay, well, this makes sense, but Mary's got information that she's going to need that's over here, and she's got information over here. She really needs that this database on resources on how to do stuff. She really needs demographics now. She really needs this. How does she find all of this stuff on my page? Or maybe she's your example is Mary's a psychology student, undergrad. So how does Mary navigate my page, and how does Mary find my resources? The more you flesh out Mary's backstory and make her a real person, the easier it is for you and your team to figure out how to actually get Mary's information that she needs. And then you can start thinking about cross promotion. Hey, Mary's got kids. What if on the business page we put a little advertisement for summer reading or our fall festival? Or this thing we're going to launch in the spring for reading in schools. Maybe Mary doesn't even know we have that kind of program because she's so focused over here on the business aspect. So putting that all together, figuring out how you can use this information and how Mary will use your page. And you're going to back that up with analytics, you're going to back that up with your usability studies, and moving forward from there. So what do you do with all this information, right? You gathered all this information and you know so much about what people hate about your site, right? Sometimes it feels that way. All the problems with your site. So you're going to do a who, how, why analysis. what is happening, right? That's what is happening in the background. What is going wrong? What is going right? How is it happening? Or how is this going down? And then why does this happen? And it might be a technical problem. It might be a silo. It might be that. So, who, what, when, where, why, right? Really basic as you start to think through the questions that you have with your study. The next thing you might want to consider, this is Miro. It's a free resource you can use for team work that I absolutely love. And I know this image isn't the clearest, but these 3 columns over here, I just love this. It's what's working, what went well, we did those UX studies. What were the 5 questions that everybody got right in one try? Let's put those over there and pat ourselves on the back for that. Okay, what required improvement? Well, these 2 things really caused issues. These were the biggest things. And then this 3rd column is suggestions, ideas. What's next? Like, okay, so while we were doing this, I had this thought, or one of the people in the study was doing this, and it made this interesting kind of, I don't quite know what to do with that information. I'm not going to say we need to fix something, but let's put it over here for discussion. And then you take those notes and you create a plan. Okay, Bob, you're going to take the first one. Mary's going to take the second one. Diana's going to take the third one. And we're going to come back next week with solutions for these 3 problems. And then we can analyze those. So it gives you a whole map of how you can move forward. And then going back to the very beginning. And here's this little assumption card is right here. Who are your users? Are they who you thought they were? How are they interacting with the site? What are they doing on the site? And what issues do they face? Were your assumptions correct? They might have been somewhat correct, but what were your surprises? And kind of start working backwards from there. And of course, the final thing is don't do all of this without a plan of how are you going to fix these issues? How are you going to address them? Knowing that your site is awful but not doing anything about it is worse than not knowing it all. So have a plan of attack for fixing the things afterwards. Baby's saying sharing an article, Healing Library Anxiety, How Comparing Libraries to Hospitals Can Improve Service to Multicultural Populations. That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm going to grab the URL and I'm going to add that to the final slides that you... Oh, no, I can't do that. Okay, never mind. It's in the recording, so make sure you get that before you link. Just click on the link. These are some resources I used today, and all of the links sort of in one happy place for you to grab them. And I'm going to give you the slide URL right now and put it in the chat box for you. So right here are the slides. It's a bit.ly URL. I'll send that to Taylor afterwards as well. But feel free. I'm going to stay on the line as long as you guys have questions. I know we went over a lot of material today. Just the tip of the iceberg for usability, but I cannot stress how eye-opening and amazing it is to do a usability study. It makes even the smallest suggestions sometimes can really make a huge change to your site. So maybe you can't control the whole template, but just the idea that you could put bullets or images or do columns or something like that might be something that you can do, and that could make a difference to your users a lot. So I thank all of you for coming. I'm going to stay here and watching. I see some people are typing, so I'm going to hang in here to see if you have questions. But if you have to get on the desk at 11 o'clock, I do understand that. So thank you so much for coming.
All right. While people type their questions up.
You too, Natalia.
As always, we encourage the Swiftlency account, the Swiftlen Facebook page, or your message from the listserv. Thank you everyone for attending and have a great rest of your day. Bye, Deb. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Deb.